One of my favorite things about making videos with ChatGPT is how politically correct it tries to come off as. So my first question for it this morning was, do rich people and policymakers dislike the poor? It comes back and it tells me the relationship between wealthy policymakers and the poor is complex and nuanced. While it's tempting to frame it as outright dislike, the reality often more about indifferent systemic bias and prioritization of self-interest. Say it ain't so, ChatGPT, that the people who are in charge have self-interests. Now, where have we seen this before? I think I saw it as an insider training on Capitol Hill, right? Insider trading in stocks meant that they knew where to put their money in order to make money and also not lose money. So they put into effect policies that directly benefit them while hurting everyone else that doesn't have the ability to get out of the way of poverty. So, why does it feel that way? Well, you guys are looking at this right now, at least you were for the first minute, and then I took it down and put up my fancy AI generated background so you guys have something to look at while I talk because I talk too much. So, with that said, let's get into a quick snippet of the story that it wrote based on this topic. So, here we go. A very poor woman. Sometimes I ask myself, do the rich really dislike us? Or do they just not care? Because let me tell you, being poor feels like being invisible. You work twice as hard for half as much, and the system still treats you like you're the problem. Why is it that poor people are always the problem? Why is it the homeless are always the problem? Immigrants are always the problem. Everything is else is the problem, and that's why rich people and policymakers have poor people in the middle class fighting each other constantly because they need a scapegoat. They always need a scapegoat. All of those alleged jobs that they're going to get rid of by removing the people that are currently doing them is not a good idea because Americans are notoriously horrible at taking bad jobs. You look at how many corporations right now have open jobs. The only problem is that it is that Americans can't afford to take those jobs. When I see a 65-year-old woman working at Trader Joe's, I don't think of a person who has a good job. I think of a person who had to settle for next to nothing because this is all that she could find. She doesn't want to work there any more than I want to work at my current job, any more than you want to go to work today, the day before Thanksgiving. We don't like working. And to that extent, we're still told that even though you don't like the taste of work, because it definitely doesn't taste good, you still have to do it. Because if the proletariat doesn't work, then we can't have rich people. And that's not something that the rich are willing to sacrifice. They will put you down, they will call you the problem, they will make it a point to say that you have to work in places you don't like. If people could only work in the places that they liked, we would probably only have 1% of the population working. Isn't that amazing how 1% of the population actually likes working? Because they don't actually have to work, right? If you're a very wealthy person, going to work isn't like having to go down to your local Walmart and clean public bathrooms. They make it seem like your attitude is the problem. They hate people who say things like minimum wage, minimum effort, and no one wants to work anymore because they demonize people who say things like that because they can't have you thinking that you shouldn't work. There are millions of open jobs that corporations are wondering why people aren't showing up for these crap opportunities, as I like to call them, because people know better. We all know when you show up at a bad job that you're just here because you need money. There is no other reason why. And when you show up every day at your job with the attitude that you don't want to be here, and then the general manager or someone above him wonders why there's this negative attitude at work. How do we increase morale? How do we get people more productive? How do we make the proletariat excited about bottom level work? And they try everything, right? And I've said this 100 times on the channel: pizza parties, raffles, music, whatever they can do in order to make it seem like work is this fun, happy place. Think about the mandatory smiles at work. And what's my favorite thing about work? Working in an office, mandatory fun time where you have to go to company parties and you have to pretend like you're having a good time. I have been forced into many mandatory fun at work. And I just like would shake my head. It's like, no, I am not coming to the company pizza party again just so that you think that you're doing something nice for the workers. Want to do something nice for the workers? Pay them a living wage. Or don't question why they show up every day smelling and looking like they just rolled out of a dumpster and into the office. Because I saw that a lot when I worked at Walmart. There were people that I actually labeled that worked there that I called walking dumpsters. These are people who put the exact same clothes on every day that they came to work. And when you would ask them why you don't buy new clothes for work, they will tell you, I am not wasting money to work here. That's their attitude. I mean, you have people whose clothes are falling apart on them who just don't care. I mean, yesterday I was walking through the Kroger's and I saw this girl wearing a pair of white Converse. I mean, they were white. That was their original color, but they were completely covered in black stains. She looked like a character out of Oliver Twist, the book. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, this is who works here. These are the people who show up and work here. They're literally characters, dirty, disgusting proletariat characters, and they don't care. They show up at work with that attitude of, I've got a lot of financial problems that I have to think about while I'm working here. And I know that's mentality because I've had it my entire life. You show up at work with your financial problems over your head, and you still have management that looks at you like you're the biggest piece of crap that they've ever seen in their life. So, let's see. Let's get into our three talking points. Again, this is the sister story to the alien story that I will publish simultaneously within a few minutes. So here we go. First talking point. The system is designed to favor the wealthy through tax breaks, corporate subsidies, and policies that protect their interests. Meanwhile, low wages, rising costs, lack of access to quality education or healthcare keep the poor trapped in cycles of poverty. It's less about individual failure and more about systemic barriers designed to maintain the status quo. Systemic barriers can be a very broad topic, but systemic barriers are a lack of access to opportunity. We all know where opportunity is because all the rich people seem to be able to suck on that same straw, whereas their counterparts at the bottom will never have access to that straw because it is protected by high walls, attack dogs, electrical fences, and I believe dinosaurs roam the property as well. Just in case someone makes it past all the other barriers, You have a giant dinosaur that will swoop down, pick you up, and throw you in its mouth, and that will be the end. It is that rigid, and intentionally so, because we can't have too many poor people thinking that working is going to make them rich. Being poor is a cycle of poor. My parents were poor. Their parents were poor. And if for some reason I happen to knock up Susie Rotten Crotch at some point in my life, which I'm still looking for Susie, I heard she exists, but I still haven't been able to nail her. But if I do, my children are going to be poor. I know that for a fact. And you know how I know that? Because I don't have anything to give them in order for them to have a foundation to build wealth on. For me, they're not going to get a house. If anything, my children are going to be burdened with everything I have. Chances are credit card debt, student loan debt, no real estate, no inheritance, and a father that had to work in a Kroger's parking lot till the last day that he got run over in the parking lot while pushing shopping carts. That's what my legacy to my children would be. That's how we all start out. That's how the system of poverty works. Why the cycle is so vicious, because we have nothing to give to our children, to a future generation, because all we did is suffer in our lives. Just like I saw my mom suffer, just like she saw her parents suffer, and just like they did. There's nothing to pay forward. And even worse, you could leave the next generation with your debt. I think years ago, I heard how your children could inherit your student loan debt. I think that's a little dystopian. Who knows? They're probably right. I mean, they got to get paid somehow, right? And if you can work your entire life at a minimum wage job after you get your education, you're never going to pay it back. You can barely afford to live. And this maintaining the status quo is something that the rich would fight to do. They don't want any changes to the system. The way that people vote, you think that they would have a horse in the race, right? They don't. When people go to vote for politicians, they're voting for people that want to keep the status quo. These are people who want things to get better. Because remember, Biden 4 years ago ran on one of the biggest problems in our society, and he won. Reduce student loan debt, get rid of student loans, get rid of the entire Department of Education, in my opinion, or just make all education free. Because people shouldn't have to start out in tens of thousands of dollars in debt just to get an education, just to work at the Dollar General. That's what's happening. And unfortunately, these people that are interested in maintaining the status quo, well, they make money. And you make money from poor people. So you got to keep things the way that they are. Talking point number two. The poor are often reduced to stereotypes or statistics, making it easier for policymakers and the wealthy to ignore their struggles. By framing poverty as a personal failure rather than a systemic issue, those in power deflect accountability while further isolating the poor from meaningful support. There is no meaningful support for poor people. Poor people can't help other poor people. Every poor person's in a struggle for survival. Every person at the bottom knows what their paycheck is going to look like. They know that they want to celebrate Thanksgiving with their families, but guess what? Most of these poor people that I'm talking about right now, they have to work on Thanksgiving, including Mello, which she was mortified by, but it is what it is. And I'll tell you, when I worked in retail, there was only one day a year that you were guaranteed that you weren't going to have to work, and that was Christmas Day. And I'm pretty certain that they've been working on getting rid of that one day for years. Because if they've managed to get rid of Thanksgiving, then guess what the next holiday they're going to get rid of is going to be? Christmas. Because Christmas is still a great day to do business. And as long as there's business to be done, the powers that be will want the proletariat working. If their customers are going to show up at their businesses, there's no reason to give the proletariat time off. And poverty as a personal failure is always a great way to let poor people know that they're responsible for the kind of work that they can get. I've often asked myself this question, especially while driving home from my job, is that every person around me in all of their cars, the lowest of the low promobiles, every person is doing the best job that they can get. And it doesn't directly equate to aptitude. You could have a PhD in whatever and still have to work at Subway because no one's hiring or no one will hire you. So you're stuck in a system that doesn't care about your education. In fact, I think I just saw a video the other day that education doesn't matter. When you show up at Evil Corp after college, they want to know what experience you have. That piece of paper, college is becoming less and less necessary for jobs than ever because you show up at a job with a college degree and not knowing how to do anything, you're going to go straight to McDonald's because they're not going to waste the time in order to train you. Most college degrees don't directly equal any sort of job because jobs are jobs that they require you to perform the mindless, repetitive task that you have to do for them all day long. And the worst part about that is they want you to already know how to do that mindless, repetitive task. Or they want you to be able to be adaptive to a particular work environment and be able to just go. They don't want to hold your hand. They don't want to spend the time micromanaging you. Or worst of all, like in my situation, my boss doesn't know what my job is. If my boss had to take over what my job is right now, he would have to start from scratch and try to figure out what it is that I do all day that keeps this department running. Because they're usually so far isolated from the position that they know what they need to hire for, they just don't know really what it does. And I think that is a direct factor when it comes to success at a job. Can you come in there and do the job like you've been doing it already? Or are you going to have to teach yourself to do the job? If you fail at both, you're not going to be working there long. In fact, the last two senior managers that we've hired at my current company, they weren't going to make it after just 3 months because they just didn't know how to do the job. Did the corporation want to jump in there and help them out? No. The message was simple, and this is what I heard from their boss. Either you sink or you swim at Evil Corp. There is no in between. Training isn't part of corporate America, which is something that I've thought a lot about because what would happen to corporate America if suddenly all the universities were closed and now it was their responsibility to teach the potential workers basic grammar and spelling because people who were coming to work for them didn't know how to type, didn't know how to use a computer, didn't know how to do anything. You basically had children. And that's the way that they want to treat you. They want people coming into the corporation and acting a certain way, but then treating you like children when it comes to every other benefit that is supposed to be offered. In that sense, they don't want to give you anything. All right, moving on to our final talking point. Waiting for the wealthy or policymakers to fix these issues is futile. Real change happens when communities unite, amplify their voices, and demand accountability. From labor strikes to grassroots movements, history shows that progress comes from the collective effort of those most affected by inequality. And to this I wrote, change comes from below and not above. We've all been waiting for the trickle-down economics, and we all know it's a joke. Whenever the poor get any trickle from the rich, it's usually salty, warm, and has a faint yellowish color, and sometimes smells like asparagus. We all know what that is. And that's the only change that we will ever see from above. They keep telling you that it's going to happen, but we know it's not happening because our lives are more miserable every day and there's no sign of improvement. If we want change, it has to come from the bottom. Remember that line from 1984. If there's hope, it lies with the proletariat.